Now I give the floor to our last speaker today, Sergii Dorgalenko. I used to introduce Sergei, but I forgot to say a very important point. I will correct myself now, because Sergei now is a fellow of SIPS, that is the acting member of SIPS, the British Institute on Procurement and Supply Chains in Ukraine. And Sergei so far is the only one in Ukraine like this, but we hope this is only the beginning, and we will have more fellow SIPS in Ukraine as well. It's not a novelty for the UK, of course, but still, there are lots of people, both they are member of SIPS and fellow SIPS, and I would like you to tell and to share your experience, which cases you had in your history, and what can you can say to those who are still contemplating, thinking about the procurement outsourcing to the customers, whether it is profitable and whether it is scary or not scary to outsource the procurement. Because I hear a lot about some prejudices or some of the frights that when you outsource some procurement part, we as the customers will get worse prices, worse services, and so on. There is such a prejudice. So far, I can't understand why, but still, would you tell about your experience, and if you may, would you comment on such people being afraid? Thank you, Marina. Okay, let us begin with, first of all, with the certain frights. Somehow, when people are speaking about the procurement outsourcing, they just imagine that there are some people coming to the office, they take your place, and you're crying out loud, you're taking your belongings to the box and going to the labor market to have free soup, and then the company is totally losing the management of the processes, and maybe you can even make more of drama and tragedy out of that. But in fact, what we are speaking about now, I've already mentioned that outsourcing has lots of other different dimensions and different types. Let's begin what's really underdeveloped in Ukraine and which is really well developed in the UK. That is interim specialists, the experts, who can be hired for some time with the contract, having a certain payment or payroll, who will temporarily cover some of the gaps in your resources matrix. What's important in that, besides you covering some of the gaps in the resources, you also can hire a person with a very interesting knowledge, kind of expertise and qualification, and this person can teach you a lot. Very often such experts are hired to launch some process. For instance, if you need the launch of the process of category management in the company, you take the interim expert and he is launching the whole process, training, showing, he is telling about his experience and bringing some unusual for your company experience and perspective onto the process. After he launched that, in some time, let's say 6 to 12 months, he is giving the key from the city to the one who he brought up during those times, and then you get the adequate expert of yours and the proper system of processes. Unfortunately, somehow in Ukraine, everybody would like to get a ready expert to headhunt it from the competitors, instead of understanding that really we are also one of the elements of the outsourcing. Secondly, very often in the marketing procurement, we are using, when we would like to buy the services, to procure the services of some creative agency, sometimes we procure the services of the designer, and sometimes we procure the services of the whole team of people who are able to provide creative from A to Z. And the same, you can outsource the procurement team, who won't definitely take the whole process on their shoulders, but they will definitely create a certain competence line which you lack today. And we are constantly saying which categories should be outsourced. But why are we speaking about categories? If you would like to try outsourcing and how it is working and what are the possible outcomes and under what terms, let you have category management and outsource the procurement itself. So the process from the need emergence to the contract, source to contract, which will be done according to the well-prepared category guidelines. Because as of today, source to contract doesn't have anything unique in it. To bargain, well, anybody can bargain, but it's important to bargain and to work with the suppliers according to the overall strategy, cautiously, understandably, and well used by everybody. So you should prepare the category guidelines and take the ones who will deal with the sourcing, give this process to the experts who will be able to help you with that. And you will efficiently use your stuff in the category management itself. Moreover, one of the sample examples, success cases where I was working when I used to work in every company, this is the same example of outsourcing. We announced about the tender procedure among the biggest consulting companies. It's not a secret that the consulting companies have the sphere of the business which is connected with outsourcing and with the development of the processes and with automation and implementation and so on. So Accenture or Bain are not doing consulting only. They have real implementers. So we announced the tender procedure to have the experts of the highest class and to provide us with the service to search for opportunities of savings, which we couldn't see because we lacked some competences. And depending on the savings, they could get a certain interest of the coordinated price. In such contracts, you need to be very cautious and serious about trust between the partners. First of all, the partners should make a deal. What savings are, how we can acknowledge and measure it, and how we can define it, how we can acknowledge it and coordinate it, and how we then use it, how it will be paid for. So in fact, it's the same outsourcing. A bigger company came, one of the biggest in the world, several dozens of people with the category expertise, 360 degrees, which totally covered our needs. They came, they analyzed the expenses, and they also defined the initiatives. They began to implement those initiatives, and after that, according to the outcomes of the efficiency indicators, I mean savings, of course, we paid them a certain part of the achieved savings. So we need to understand that outsourcing isn't definitely paid as one-time or hour-by-hour payment. Sometimes outsourcing is a so-called contract on distributing risks, and not only risk distributing, but also revenues. Because we are making a deal together that there will be some experts coming who will help us to achieve additional savings, and we are motivating them that the part of this economy will be paid. Some of these savings will be paid. So why do we need to deal with to look at the outsourcing, and why everybody is so scared that we will get less savings if we give some categories for outsourcing? We need to understand, especially after what COVID did with all of us in the industry, that the emphasis of our industry are shifting from the savings to the speed, efficiency, and flexibility. As of today, how quickly and efficiently we are implementing the needs of our business and how they are implemented into some supplies, contracts, and the work with the counter agents, it's much more important than those 3 pennies which you can save. The quality is important. The high quality service which will be timely provided for your business. And for that, you, as all of us, and in any company, we are working under the conditions of the scarce resources. You will never have enough of resources. That is why your resources should be done, would give the biggest value added. But to provide tender procedures for a year or 2 and to fight with the suppliers for the 3% of the savings without giving business an opportunity to award the contract with some of the suppliers and to get revenues, in fact, this is the murder of the business of the company. So we need to think not what we save, that we save 3 pennies or 6 pennies, but we should think to attract the experts who will allow us to concentrate on what's really important for the business, and they will take the routine transactional work. That is why I would like you to think about. And also you should Google, because there is vested contracts. One more interesting thing, vested contracts. So it's a kind of authorized ones. So beginning with 2015, at least that's when they were mentioned for the first time about those vested contracts, some of the companies decided to award contracts for outsourcing, not by the payment and not even by the risk distribution, but they measured the efficiency of outsourcing contracts according to the outcomes. They were not saying what I am obliged to do for you as an outsourcer. They were speaking what I, as a customer, would like to achieve. For instance, if I gave the management of my real estate to some outsourcer, I can award a contract with them where the main component of the pricing will be the assessment of the satisfaction of my employees by the services from the providers. So the trust between the businesses and the customers and suppliers can be so high that they will entrust into each other, not just to award the contract and to follow each other to have the proper work done. They will work together to improve the indicators of business productivity of the customer. So the customer is creating the measure system he would like to achieve thanks to this or that service, and the provider begins to work how to optimize those indicators. So in the end of the day, well, this is a very long story, but I would like to say that, in fact, the world of outsourcing is endlessly interesting. It's totally multifaceted, and it is done according to the trust. So I wouldn't recommend you to pose the question how we can soften the landing, because we will be definitely deceived. But we should think that in the modern business, you and your provider should not only trust each other, but to work for one result. Thank you. Thank you, Sergei, so much for your experience and for sharing experience and for the examples you mentioned and listed. Well, of course, your speech brought to some questions, and it's okay. There is the question which is directly connected to what you were we're speaking about. Victoria is asking, she's going on to be very active. Sergei, the payment for the consultant services was calculated from the savings de facto, and during how long time did you implement the initiatives on the reduction of costs? Well, yes, we decided to calculate the payment for the consultants out of the savings. So there is the saving of the current period, there is the saving of the future period. So if we now award a 5-year contract in 2021, everything which is in the financial years of 2022 and further on is the savings of the future period. So these savings will be restricted just by the current financial period only. It's not that easy to understand, because if in the middle of the year you begin the negotiations, up to the third quarter you award the contract, then to achieve some savings they will have only 3 months left. But they have to conduct the analysis of expenses and costs to understand what situation he's at. He must provide the proper home task, and only after that provide some savings. So, in fact, the adequate period of calculation of savings is 2 years from the awarding of the contract. It is adequate because since you signed the contract till you get the first payments, there will be at least half of the year, 3 months at least. I'm speaking about the bigger companies and bigger contracts. Several months will be spent by the provider to analyze your data, to define the initiatives which will bring the highest efficiency, to approve those initiatives with the business, by the way, and with you as well as the procurers. Because any company, whether this is McKinsey or Boston Consulting, they will come to your company and they will say, I consider that you need to use Renault vehicles, not Mercedes. So those are nice expectations, but without the approval of the management, the savings cannot be implemented. So 2 or 3 months will be done for the preparation, and after that, we'll have the pipeline initiative. This is the sequence of the initiatives. And even the first initiatives will bring their fruits only in several months. So you should calculate that the provider will get the first revenue in 4 to 6 months, and he needs to cover serious investments. So you need to calculate for about the horizon of 2 years. Victoria is trying to clarify, what about the respite or the deferral of payment? 4 to 6 months, right? The first payment came to the provider in 6 months, right? And then in certain periods, they were paid when the results were achieved. Yes, quarter by quarter, we had a certain process to search for savings, to approve the savings, and to implement the savings. So when the initiative was going along this process, I would say formally that we had 4 flags to pass. So each initiative which passed the last flag was getting to the invoice. But again, we need to say that when the company where I was working, the multi-billion turnover company with the budget of procurement of $6 or $7 billion, even some companies like Bain or BCG, they would be ready to wait for 6 months to earn 150 million. They potentially saw such an opportunity. When we speak about the smaller projects, of the less complicated and low complexity projects, it's important to assess the basis of the possible savings. If we say that if your company is spending, well, I don't know, let it be 1 billion hryvnia, let it be even 1 billion, but your budget of procurement is 1 billion. Okay, if we save 3% of it, This money will come to us in 4 or to 6 months. So whether it is possible for you as the IT provider to invest the money, I'm not sure that the providers would like to do that. They would like to have some prepayment, I say, for their minimal efforts which they can spend to prepare the whole project. And then they will get revenues depending on the success of the project itself. In any case, as far as I understand, it's always the process of a deal, of making a deal. It depends on the category, on the situation, and on the longevity of the project and the involvement of the people. I emphasize not only the category, but the types of activities. Yes, the types of activities. We're always speaking about categories for outsourcing, but we can give the sourcing, for instance. We can give some elements of source to contract process for outsource, but you can define themselves what you give for the outsourcing. You shouldn't just give it out, just take everything and give it to the outsourcing. Try to be choosy. Begin with the smallest. Well, you have described how the company was working in IT Hub, but there are some different processes or some other opportunities in the procurement outsourcing when you can provide certain transactional operations for outsourcing and just to pay monthly payment for the processes if it is done. Well, that's what I began with when I was telling that you can take people for outsourcing, that is some physical bodies and some competences, or you can take the teams and those teams will perform certain actions. You can provide certain categories. So in fact, this is again a selective Lego constructor. Everything depends on you. You can choose and define what is the most important for you from the business case perspective. Yes, as it was told by the previous speakers, both Debbie and Elaine and Larry, that the main thing is to define the aim, the goal, and to define the outcomes you'd like to achieve, and to define the part you're ready to give for the outsourcing. To go with the smaller steps, if you're too afraid, you can take the smallest one to try, and then if it works, if there are certain outcomes, if you and provider have this chemistry and physics between you in the relationship, then you can go deeper. But if you don't have it, if you lack it, then because of some reasons, it's not working. Because of some reasons, it's not functioning. There can be lots of reasons for that. Okay, thank you so much. We've got one more question, and I will come back to it. And I would ask the participants to ask the questions as well. Before I read it out loud, because it's in Russian, I would like to say that everybody was saying that we need to train to develop ourselves about the culture. We need to understand what is and how is working. And we were speaking about the category management and relationship, what's very important, both within the stakeholders and also with our external providers. So our company of IPSM is doing a lot to develop this culture in Ukraine and beyond. We have online trainings which are accessible to the public in Russian and Ukrainian. And I would like to say that soon we will have 2 trainings where you can get this knowledge, gain this knowledge and train. In May, this will be the negotiations training, and in June, this will be the category management training. And also I'd like to drive your attention that our next event, which will be done together with the Procurement Central and where we'll go on with the discussing of the procurement, will take place on the 20th of May, and it will be devoted to the management of and the relationship with the suppliers. This topic of relationship is so important. The suppliers' relationships management is the topic we need to discuss and to develop this competence. On the post-Soviet space, this is one of the most painful topics, I would say, the issue of relationships. And we will be saying that what we need to do with the suppliers, how we should pay more attention to them. And also we have a Telegram channel, Procurement News, where we post interesting and useful news. Please subscribe it. My colleagues have sent the links to the chat, and they will be also sent out in the letters which we will send to all of our participants. And also I would like to mention the last question, so far the last one. Maybe there will be some, to all of the participants of today's speakers. Whoever, would you please comment on that? So Allah asks, I have some of the persuasion that a typical CEO is not interested in procurement at all. The majority of tops are in the routine thinking. They're afraid to lose control over the procurement without concentrating on the outcomes of the procurement. Would you comment on that?
So I would like to comment and start. Can I just make a comment on that? So,
Sure.
I completely agree that when Larry, aided and assisted by Lucky the cat, was talking about a tensioned relationship with suppliers, actually what we're also talking about is a tensioned relationship with internal stakeholders. And I absolutely agree with that comment, that people in the business, and when Ellie was talking, she was saying about her view about managing the contract, the agreement, the outsourcing business case. But in actual fact, it's our colleagues in the business who could possibly undermine us, who could possibly talk to suppliers, and it's not with one voice. In many cases, you can have Ellie used the expression, a senior member of your organization, and obviously the CEO may not be speaking in tough love to the supplier. They may be speaking in a very familiar way, a very soft way, and that can put us at a disadvantage. So the point I just wanted to make here to that question was obviously your role in this, and there is a tool, the old-fashioned RACI, the RACI, making sure that the governance is right before you go out and start engaging with suppliers, that is to say, looking at the marketplace. You need to establish yourself. You need to ensure your position in the organization is, at the very least, understood. What your role is, I'm sure Larry or Ellie said that, what your role is in all of this. Because if you don't, people around you will undermine you, and you will obviously lose confidence. The CEO does not, that's a blanket statement, isn't it? That they don't understand, but some do, some finance directors do, and others have a much more, what shall we say, binary view of procurement. So it's our job, the point I'm making is it's our job to educate and to sell what we sometimes loosely call strategic procurement to the stakeholders and to the business first. Sorry, Sergei, I probably cut across you when that question came in.
Есть что добавить, Сергей?
Sergei, do you have anything to add? Well, first of all, no, you did not cut me. I can't add much to what Stephen mentioned. Everything was totally right and adequate. Well, of course, CEO, we all know that CEO in lots of other our companies where I had to work at, they can be rather skeptic or narrow-minded in the procurement sphere. Then we need to define, first of all, how we can position ourselves in the company and to choose the paradigm before we change the process. So if you still are considered to be the best procurer or the best headhunter for the suppliers, then you don't need outsourcing. But if they don't expect anything from you anymore, but if you can show your superiors that you are much more useful and inventive and efficient for the company than just the person who is chasing the suppliers and taking their last shirt, then you can speak about the outsource. The beauty of outsourcing is that it is really well working with the business case. Any CEO and especially CFO will be definitely open and receptive for that. They will be open to receive information because the cases of outsourcing can be well digitalized. And we said that which indicators they have of return on investments, and they're rather adequate because with good money, you will be able to procure the best experts at the market who will definitely provide you an outcome. So please try to work on the paradigm of the procurement in the company itself and reposition yourselves as the suppliers of value added, not just sellers for the discounts. Thank you so much. You are very cardinal considering our Ukrainian reality. Yes. Okay, then. Do we have anything to add or should we finalize the session? Because we took too much of time already, but still everybody is staying with us till the end.
Yeah.
There are no questions left. Stephen, let us conclude.
So thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, obviously, to our amazing speakers and experts. So to Sergii and to Larry and to Elaine and to Debbie for her expertise. Also, thank you to those amazing voices in the background of the interpreters. As I say, every time you are the magicians. I have no idea how you do your job, but you do it very, very well. So thank you, as always, to you. I just wanted to say, and you'd expect me to say this anyway, there are lots of parts, what do they call it? Lots of moving parts. I think that's the current expression, isn't it? Lots of moving parts in outsourcing. So yes, as Sergii said, companies like Bain & Co., most of us have worked with them. They come in with very, very big, ambitious numbers. They bring in some very, very bright graduates, highly intelligent people, but they don't know your business. They don't understand what value means to you. So just be very, very careful of the expression Greeks bearing gifts, but consultants bearing big gifts for finance directors. It's not always the same, by the way, with purchase to pay. It's not always the case that everything can yield quite the big numbers that the likes of Boston Consulting and Bain say. Look at the total cost of ownership, as Ellie said. We can assist with some of the practical side, as Marina said, whether it's training or whether it's consultancy, whether it's helping you with business cases, pulling business cases together, whether it's, as Larry said, things like process maps, risk assessments, to look at the possible risks. And there, as Ellie said, it isn't for the faint-hearted. There are, I'm repeating what I've said, lots of moving parts, lots of things. You couldn't possibly think of a pandemic that would come along. I worked in insurance, and there was a thing called the Twin Towers, and nobody could have possibly thought of that. There are things that come and happen. and having intuitive people to make judgments in supplier relationship roles is essential when that happens. So we can assist you with the risk. We can assist you indeed with calculating savings that are real, you know, that don't include cost avoidance and so on. So if you need our help, we're here. We'd love to work with you. But otherwise, it's a big thank you for attending, a big thank you to all the people that have taken part. And as ever, sending our love across the world, and hope to, as Marina said, hope to see you at our next event next month.